Plenty of seats in the front. Let's fill them up, let's fill them up. Those getting the last beers, there are more, I assure you, don't worry. Come on in, guys, come on in. Let's gather around, let's gather around. They are comfy chairs now, thank you. Yes. Alright, we've got everyone. Right, good afternoon everyone.
Good afternoon, evening.
Oh, evening. Good evening everyone.
Good evening.
Oh god, everyone's bloody tired. Let's try and rev it up a little bit. So welcome to our What's Now London. Today we're specifically focused on unpacking the future of work. All probably wondering who on earth is this person talking to you at the moment. So my name is Sanjay Nant. I work in the Applied Innovation Exchange, an amazing place, but I won't explain too much what it's about because you're going to hear more about it in a moment. But what I get to do there is I get to work as our ecosystem lead. And it's a really awesome job because what it means is I get to work with startups, I get to work with scale-ups, I get to work with large organizations and ultimately put together evenings like we have tonight. This is not a single event, there's a whole team that put together this event that we have for us tonight. I want to get a bit of a view of the crowd. Who's been to one of these What's Now Londons before? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, I think about 20-30%. And I assume everyone else hasn't. So why we set these up, a lot of the people and the teams that we work with, we've worked in kind of creative spaces, we worked in kind of the TED and TEDx models, and ultimately we wanted a forum in which people can come together, like-minded individuals, disruptors, creatives, and actually have an evening discussing what's happening in the world. Actually, what are our roles in that new world? And actually just want to bring like-minded people together. There's two key things out of today that we want to achieve. Number one, you all meet someone new and build your network. That's a huge goal for us. And the second thing is you learn something new. It could be the smallest thing, it could be the biggest thing. But you take something away from today and you use that going forward. I'm going to cheat a little bit now. So that first one, meeting someone new, I'm going to ask those of you, if you've come with someone that you know on your right and left, just peek over to them. Get to know someone you don't know. I can give you 1 minute. Introduces people to left and right. Why are you here? What brought you to this event? Ten seconds. All right, let's finish up. Not live stories, just a quick intro. All right. Objective 1, tick. Woo, done. Okay. Some generic housekeeping stuff then. There's no There's no planned fire alarms for this evening. If the alarm does go off, please treat it seriously. You'll find the exits just in the way that you came through. There's a set of stairs. The muster point is below us, just towards the pret, as on the entry point. Toilets and what have you. Also, where the lifts that you would have walked in by. You can find them there. The doors are open. If you struggle to get out, just flag one of us down. There's a few staff on point that can help you. We're live streaming this. Hello, those on YouTube. Johan, we are live streaming. Yep, awesome. But we're also tweeting as well. So we're using the hashtag What's Now London. And my ask is, please, phones, they're great things for taking photos, what have you. Just pop them on silent for us for this next couple of hours. That'll be a huge piece for us. So a little bit about the format then. So those that arrived and got the drinks early, you would have seen our marketplace just behind you. So that's going to be an area in which you're going to get to see a few of our startups that we've got here with us today. But the first part we're going to kick off with is our rapid fire talks. So you're going to hear from 4 different talkers, all in different areas. We're picking on 3 different areas when we talk about work. Looking at the tooling side of things, looking at the environment, the workspaces that we live in, and then finally the people side. So what does it mean in this new world for us as individuals and employees? And that's something we want to explore. So we'll do some fire rapid talks. We'll go to the marketplace, grab a bit of drinks, explore those startups, encourage new conversations. We'll have a few more talks, and then finally we'll wrap up with a panel discussion. But often we get asked when we do these events, why did you pick that topic? Why the future of work? Recently we did one on unpacking the future of sports. So just a brief introduction before we get into the talks themselves. This is probably the most overused statement we're seeing everywhere. The world is changing, we're all doomed, we're screwed, right? It's constantly in the news, everywhere. The reality is somewhat hilarious though. We look at our smartphones, how it's changing us. And those with kids might even be able to relate to this. It's just infinite possibilities with a timeless smartphone. Interestingly though, we hear these scary articles, you know, AI is going to steal all our jobs, Forbes, February, Forbes, the next month. It's fine, we're fine, don't worry about the AI thing. Not an issue, fear not. But there are things that are happening. So interestingly, recently in China, they created an AI anchor. So
hello everyone, I'm an English artificial intelligence anchor. This is my very first day in Xinhuang's agency, my voice.
So you can see his lips there, barely moving. That individual actually, he's been part of the organisation. They've now modelled him in AI. And again, so JP Morgan apparently has eradicated lawyers' work, all those hours in seconds. Big scary titles. And you know, we keep hearing about autonomous vehicles and how they're going to change everything we do and what they're about. It's a billion-dollar industry. The thing I like about this is a scary stat, yeah, sure, but the thing I like is the second piece, which is soon it might be illegal for humans to drive. That's quite interesting, right? We've been the ones in power, now actually it might be us that are the danger. In terms of roles, anyone recognise what this individual might be doing, this role?
Selfie stick.
Selfie stick? Best answer so far today. Any other guesses? No? Okay. This role is called a knocker. So this individual, before alarm clocks, would walk around the streets and actually knock on people's doors. These are the kind of jobs that are being removed due to technology and how it's helping us today. So this big scary thing is actually moving us as individuals into new areas, new worlds. Another job role. Do we feel evil for taking these poor kids' jobs? I don't know. They're getting to do better things now. They don't have to worry about these things here. So, interestingly, The Guardian said recently, technology's created more jobs than it's destroyed in all this time. And actually, before, even 10 years ago, none of these roles existed. And actually, what's 10 years from now going to look like? I'm going to finish this off on a quote from Darwin. And put simply, he talks about evolution a lot, and ultimately here he's saying the strongest of species that survive, not the most intelligent, but ultimately the ones that are able to adapt. So we've got to see this technology as an enabler, as one point of view. But then finally, who are the organisations that are going to be ready for this change? With that, I'd love to introduce our first speaker of the day, our Head of Applied Innovation, Priscilla Lee. Give a round of applause for Priscilla.
Is it all right? Okay. Well, thank you, Sanjay. First of all, I'm not without this amazing team, so can we give a round of applause to this team for putting this together? So Sanjay set me up, and a couple of questions you probably have is, what is the AIE? So I think we should answer that first. And the mission of the AIE is that we're here to inspire people and organizations to change the world through emerging technology, ideas, and ways of working. Sounds like a pretty good job, right? Highly uncertain, as Sanjay said, which brings us to why this is a problem today in terms of how do we help organizations adapt. Change has never been as slow as today. How many believe that to be true? Show of hands. Change has never been as slow as today. Only one? Because what that statement says is it's only going to get faster. If we think it's bad now, it's only going to get worse, which means the pressure to embrace that change is increasing, right? Now, show of hands, do you believe that to be true? Okay, it's getting better because I was a little bit worried. Okay. Two facts that I think honestly scare some of our clients. 75% of S&P companies will no longer exist in 10 years. And of the top 5 companies, which is astonishing to me than a decade ago, 13% account for the S&P, 5. And 40% of the growth. Those are stars. So the question is for the other companies, what are they? What are they left with? So then we ask, how are you managing that change? Well, we have to sustain and scale innovation. And so what the AIE is trying to do, beyond trying to solve complex problems of today and tomorrow through emerging technology, is how are we going to sustain it? How do we help them and enable them to do that? Because currently the way they're doing that is more like this. We'll just design our way through it, yeah? Just a couple more restructures. A lot of companies are still on the left-hand side. Every time I show this, I say it's near past, and they said, no, 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 it's today, Priscilla. I'm like, oh, okay, it's today. And we're just starting on this cross-functional thing, right? Multidisciplinary teams, etc. And yet startups, and how many are from startups here? Just curious. You're working like this, right? Squads, autonomous individuals, right? That do the work that need to do. And Spotify, I know, kind of helped kind of term that model. So it becomes a choice. So now I'm gonna try to illustrate why this might be a challenge. So Gartner says 40% of CDOs believe their #1 problem that keeps them up at night is culture change. They know it's a people problem. So I'm going to ask, how many of you have English as your first language? Show of hands. All right. First language. English is your second language? Hands up. Okay. How many consider digital as your first language? Okay. More and more, that's what the younger generation is going to say. Digital is my first language, not even English. Have you guys seen the YouTube video where you see babies trying to swipe their TV screens or swipe their magazines? It's broken. It's not working. They've already comprehended something that we've learned years later. So can we imagine how hard it is when we go to a foreign country and don't speak the language, and we're trying to be our best selves. We're trying to communicate and understand each other, but we just don't speak the language. There's a digital divide that goes now into what I would say is literacy. Digital literacy and proficiency. And a lot of people skip this. The whole idea of speed and scale, that's great, that's outcomes. That's outcomes. But we're kind of skipping the taxonomy. Well, the meaning. Meaning is the context of the environment you're in. And understanding it means you have to apply it, right? You have to actually do projects that are digital. You have to use the technology that is digital. But that's not shared or pervasive in a company. So I'll ask you another question. How many of you find that your customer tools are easier than your employee tools? How many find that your customer tools like Skype or like WhatsApp or like it's easier to use than your company tools? Hands up. That's not too bad. I thought there'd be all hands up because we do kind of leave our employees behind as well in that process of digital proficiency. So I want to talk about how we're trying to address it. So one thing is, I love that we're getting people to solve complex problems in new ways. But what we're finding is that they're not always at the same level, and they're not always the same ambition. So different companies consider themselves on a different spectrum. And I've labeled these DNA of applied innovators because there's actually a little bit of secret sauce to people that do this really well. So I talked about those top 5 companies. They have these attributes. They know how to apply them, and that means having some cultural resilience, taking risks. That means being digitally native, using technology, but also understanding it quite in depth, being customer obsessed, software excellent. A lot of companies are finding today that used to be in manufacturing are now in software. They're deploying every second of the day, not every week, not every month. And landscape driven. So we're trying to stretch where is the gap and how do we fill that gap? And why that's important is we can get doing a lot of stuff, but are we taking note of the attributes and what we're pushing? Are we stretching ourselves in the capability? Because if you're only modernizing your core technology, you're probably not stretching yourselves all that much. I know that I have less time, so what I would say is if you're interested in this and learning about this more, come to us. We do have some takeaways in the bag for you in terms of what the AIE does. We do a lot of projects that stretch this in various degrees. But I think there's something that I also want our lead, Danny, to talk about, which is our ways of working. So in executing all of this, how do we start embedding this DNA in organizations? How do we start making it easier and providing the right tooling? And so this is where I introduce Danny, our Ways of Working lead, to tell you more about that.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well. So thanks for the lovely introduction to the Applied Innovation Exchange, Priscilla. So my role as Ways of Working lead is very much to enable our own people to be able to deliver on some of the problems that Priscilla discussed. So over about a year ago, when I fell into that role, I sort of challenged myself to think about what would a utopian workspace or working environment look like, okay? Where everybody is sort of has the same stable backbone in terms of the tooling, the same level of proficiency that empowers them to also be independent but synonymous in the way that they work. So how can we create a level playing field to onboard people into a space and leverage those sort of proficiencies that we'd want them to as quickly as possible, right? Because we talk about speed and we talk about scale very quickly. What we found is when we started looking at our ways of working was, Priscilla stole this slide from me, by the way, is that the problem that the opportunity this creates is phenomenal, but some of the issues that come along with this is, this has given birth to a lot of new tooling, which we're here to talk about today. Amazing, amazing tools. Tools that help us project manage better, build the bridges between design and development capabilities, and allow us to be more productive, more collaborative in general. What we found is that people's proficiency in using these tools, and there's so much choice as well, so people like to choose, I don't know, use Slack over Microsoft Teams, or whatever it may be, Google Hangouts instead of Skype. So those platforms and the different levels of proficiency and practices started causing a lot of friction in the workplace, right? They actually held us back from being able to make very quick progress and work collaboratively. So what does that mean for us is that in terms of that utopian world, the question we had to ask ourselves is, how do we change that paradigm? The paradigm from not only organizations working as a machine in those siloed ways, but also all the frictions that come with the various tooling and the dynamic environment that comes along in working with squads. To move it almost to a new model, which is organizations living organisms, right? As living organisms, if I was to be kind of attacked by a new virus bacteria, my body would naturally adapt or release the white blood cells necessary to try and tackle that virus, okay? So how do we create, the question that we had to come up with and the vision that we set ourselves is, how do we help ourselves, our organization first and foremost, adopt agile ways of working and create the future tools that we need in order to be able to behave like a human organism, to be able to be dynamic and agile in the way that we work. McKinsey had a report that agile organizations are 70% more likely to fall in the top quartile for organizational health, which is sort of the best metric that defines organizational performance over the long term. And they found that those organizations actually, when pressure is exerted, they don't only just kind of show more robustness, they actually outperform other organizations in terms of customer centricity, in terms of higher revenue growth, time to market, as well as kind of lower costs in general. So everybody's trying to, we use this term a lot, everybody's trying to be more agile and more dynamic, and we know the squad teams sort of enable us to do that, and those tools exist to do that. What we wanted to do, this gave birth to Workspace, which is kind of a project that we undertook around how we can disrupt and create this kind of frictionless environment where everybody is kind of on the same level playing field with the tools that they use. And we found that what we need to do is we need to create a single source of truth for everybody in all the tools. What we personally use is Slack to communicate. Everybody that joins our team has to use that, but it doesn't matter which tool you use. What we wanted to do is essentially everybody comes through that naturally. From that point on, they would be registered and integrated with all the other tools they need in the space. And as a result, we created kind of a workspace assistant, someone that can take you through everything that you need to know, onboard you and show you different ways of working, and capture that information. Now, what's really interesting is if you can, actually, I'm not going to talk about this too much. What we did was we started experimenting So each week we run different sprints, we experiment with different ways of working, and we entered a hackathon. So Capgemini had the biggest ever global hackathon recently. It was called AI for Change. And we challenged ourselves to think, okay, how can we take our workspace concept forward and leverage some technologies to try and, I guess, create this frictionless environment. So I think I'll pass over to a video to sort of tell the story a little bit more.
Imagine if the screens in our workspace could recognise individuals and surface tailored updates on the projects that they are working on at any given time. Imagine if you had a singular view of your workload and an indication of the order you should complete tasks to make you and your team as efficient as possible. Imagine if you and your team could work much more collaboratively by seeing real-time progression of work and how tasks relate to and impact each other. Welcome to the AI Activity Stream, a prototype created by hackathon team Tokenization Nation that uses data and artificial intelligence to enhance the tools used by high-performing Scrum teams to develop products in an agile environment. Our team envisioned and developed this concept after gathering key insights from developers, UX designers and product owners around current ways of working. Using data pulled from various development and project management tools, combined with a custom-built data science model, the AI Activity Stream integrates Trello, GitHub, Worker and Slack onto a single platform and groups the content to curate a personalised digital thread of all the activities allocated to one person. The digital thread is then surfaced through a web page that uses facial recognition to identify team members and then display their personalised dashboard. Once the project is complete, the data collected could then be used as historical data, and with the help of machine learning, make predictions on future projects, such as how long specific tasks might take, and the resources required of best team members to carry out tasks. We presented our idea to participants of CUIN, where we gained some valuable feedback and tested the concept with other product owners and developers. The AI Activity Stream, an intelligent platform to drive efficiency and collaboration in Scrum teams.
So in a utopian world, we didn't actually want to create a new solution. It's just going to introduce something as people to a new concept. The idea is that what if you could carry on using the tools that you normally use, but in some sort of intelligent way, we could integrate those into a single platform and then leverage that information to try and create tools that will enable you or empower you to go faster and be more productive. So the whole concept is very much that there's an assistant that registers you, and from that point you capture all the events that you happen to use as you normally would with those tools, and then you stand up in front of a screen, and that screen would recognize you based on your picture maybe on LinkedIn or Slack, and then we'll show you an overview of all the information for your project, a nice overview that collates all of the relevant insights from your project. So you don't have to go to the various places, you don't have to be overloaded with push notifications. We wanted to create a seamless, frictionless solution to be able to digest all that information, and then by using AI, we actually start recommending over time, through machine learning as well, some optimized next best actions, things that you can take forward to optimize your ways of working. So I'm really excited today that we've got a lot of speakers, a lot of startups that we are very much dependent on the tools that enable us to do this, and we look forward to seeing those guys here and integrating more of those solutions into ways of working in a way that's seamless and kind of allows us to be at the same proficiency level over time. Thank you very much.
All right. So we're now going to move gears a little bit. We're going to move over to an organisation of ultimately fundamentally rethinking the workspaces that we actually work in our day-to-day. It's crazy how much time actually we spend in the environments that we work in from a 9 to a 5. So I'm going to introduce Chris from Notel, who's going to bring to life Notel and what they're up to. Can we get a round of applause for Chris?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? At the back? Very good. What kind of people do we have in the room? Who we got that works in an office? Everyone. Who has ever experienced not working in an office but working in other environments? And who's worked in retail? Who's worked outdoors? Okay, so a bit of a mix. Thank you very much, that's very helpful for me. I actually want to start by talking about cities, because offices are in cities. Cities are becoming more and more important. Obviously, the world is urbanizing at a faster and faster rate. We move beyond the point where the majority of the world's population is living in cities about 5 or 6 years ago. And the rate hasn't slowed down. Cities are going to become more and more fundamental drivers of economic activity, and more of us are going to live there. I think that's a given. What does that mean for cities? Well, they're going to have to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and there will be more big cities in the world, but the global centers will continue to get very, very large. That means that the pressure in the centers of cities isn't going away. The places where the majority of us work, in offices in the centers of cities, isn't going to get any less. The pressure is just going to increase. What does that mean for our offices? Well, our offices are going to have to change. We have done office in essentially the same way for 50, 60, 80 years. Changes like the shift from cellularized office to open plan offices aren't actually that big a change, aren't actually that big a shift. You go back 100 years and most offices were open plan, and only the top level of executives were in cellularized offices. And then as we got wealthier in the West, our offices started to become more cellularized over time. And then as the density and pressure on office space increased, we started to have to go back to open plan offices again. Who likes being in an open plan office? Less than half the room. Who absolutely hates being in an open plan office? One person. Who finds open plan acceptable but just about grins and bears it? Just under half the room. Open plan office isn't the answer. We know this from quick surveys of hands in a room, but we also know this from workplace studies. Workplace strategists spend a lot of time thinking about these things. Who likes working in a sofa, on a sofa? A quarter of the room. Who likes working in a cafe? A quarter of the room. I could go on, but the point I'm making here is actually it turns out that people like working in different environments at different times of the day, and we ought to be building office in a way that suits the wider variety of people and not assume that one size fits all for everyone in the way they work. So how do you do that? Well, in the traditional model where the landlord owns the building and the customer has taken a long lease from that landlord, and they've had to spend a bunch of money right up at the beginning to fit the space out, and say it's a company that makes plastic bottles somewhere in a factory somewhere, or it's a company, it's an accountancy firm. Their main line of business isn't office design. Their main line of business isn't property investment, isn't furniture, isn't these things that are important to the way that the office functions itself. So they're not experts in it. And it's difficult and time consuming for their staff to design space and make it continuously adapt over time to the way they work. And most of you are going to be familiar with the outcome of this, which is your office doesn't really change. The footpath along the carpet tiles down the aisle is worn in the same way over 5-10 years because no one has changed the layout of the desks for 5-10 years. What changes when Notel or other operators come into the market is that we take on the responsibility of designing, creating, operating office space. What does that mean for us, for our occupiers, for our customers? It means that someone, a professional, at designing and developing and delivering office is able to make office better and make office more agile so that it matches the dynamics and the changing needs of the business that is occupying the space over time. Let me give you examples, and sorry I didn't have time to prepare some slides for this, but hopefully you'll be able to use your imaginations. In a world where the occupier of the space has to invest in furniture when it's not their main line of business, they're going to buy desks right at the beginning. They're going to put those desks out in the space in a layout that makes sense to them at the time, and those desks are going to stay there. In a world where we're operating and managing the space for you, where we're operating and managing the environment for you, we're able to buy better furniture of different kinds and different styles and different types that enable the different work environments that we talked about earlier. And we're able to store that furniture and bring it in and make it accessible and usable for our customers at the right time. So, for example, in a workspace that ought to have a couple of breakout spaces, some cafe-style working areas, some soft seating, some sofas, some open plan desking, some phone booths, some meeting room booths. Those are a lot of different types of furniture, and they're quite expensive. What we can do is buy those things and deliver them into the space in the right configuration, in the right time, so the customers are using the space more efficiently over the full range of their life cycle in that space. One of the things that Knotel is better able to do than typical customer occupying a space is change the space over time with a customer. So, when a customer first moves into our space, we'll sit down with them and we'll talk about how their business departments work with each other. Their salespeople are often on the phone. Their developers need quiet space to work in. Their purchasing teams need to bring people in regularly and have meetings together. Fairly standard stuff. But over time, their business, the balance between the teams of their business might change. They might need more salespeople. They might need fewer developers. Or their developer team, their product team, actually needs to reconfigure itself so that their salespeople sit next to their developers. Their procurement teams need to sit next to their salespeople. In a conventional office environment, people shuffle around on the same set of desking. In an agile working environment, the future working environment, those different teams need different kinds of furniture, and that furniture needs to move around the office space over time to suit the configuration and the layout, the connections between the different departments, the different teams within the business. What that means is someone has to step into the business on a regular basis, every few months, every 6 months, every year, talk to them about their office environment and how it's working for them now, how their business teams are working together, and whether there are any changes that can be made for those different teams and those different departments. Then has to affect that change. We have to be able to bring in the right kind of furniture for the right teams at the right time through the life of that occupier in that space. Something that could not be done before without a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort on the part of the business. Now that we're able to deliver office as a service, office in an office space that shifts and modifies itself over time to make sure it's always suitable for the business, businesses are going to be able to use space more efficiently. How do I tie that back to cities? Well, if the pressure on office space is always going to go up, the price of office space is probably likely to go up. The importance of the efficiency of office is significant. The importance of efficiency of the workplace becomes more and more significant. So we have to work harder, businesses have to work harder at making office do more faster in some of those ways that I was talking about. One of the other issues with office, one of the other problems with office is the cost of entry into an office space and the cost of exit into office space. And in the traditional model, like I said earlier, you have to step into a space, you have to take a long lease, you have to fit the space out, buy all the furniture, and then when you want to move, because your business has grown faster than you expected, or grown faster than the 10 years that you're signing up the lease for, you're going to have to exit that space, find someone to buy that space off you, find someone to take some of the furniture off your hands, probably at a loss, probably have to give it away for free. And you often have to return the space or reinstate the space back to the original condition for the landlord. Again, in a model where you can access office as a service, from Knotel, the entry costs and exit costs don't exist because we look after all of that for you. You're not paying for furniture up front. You're not paying to exit a space early or late. The space that you choose to buy can always be, they can be more optimal for your business over time. So those are a handful of ways that Office is changing. A handful of ways that the future of Office, the future of the workplace is happening sooner than we think. A handful of ways that our office environments are going to change very quickly over time in the short term. And those changes are happening because there's a fundamental shift in the dynamic of the market, the relationships between owners of buildings and occupiers of buildings. And that shift is being enabled by businesses like Knotel, by operators of office space. For the first time, professional delivery of office as a service. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Chris. So we're halfway through. I see many empty beer bottles. I can see many people wanting a refill. So it's perfect timing. What we're going to move into now, I mentioned at the beginning, today's all about kind of three areas. We've talked about unpacking work. There's the physical side of things, the environments, and we had Chris talk about that briefly just there. There's the tooling that we use, and Danny gave a talk around how we're exploring the full integration that could be achieved. But now in the marketplace, what we're going to have is, so in a moment we're going to ask you all to move over to the marketplace, and there's going to be two startups there that you might recognise. So the first is Perkbox, who are trying to transform... So is Perkbox? Strong. So they're transforming how employees are recognised through perks and what we do. And then secondly, there's HastyPay. So ultimately, HastyPay, saying right? Got it. Ultimately, how can we actually transform the way that we're paid? So at the moment, for the most of us, we're paid monthly. What if actually we could get paid for the exact time we worked instantly? How would that work? How would that actually come to life? And then finally, you'll get to see the AI activity stream that Danny mentioned, and the final piece from our Capgemini connected workspace offering. So there's going to be 4 incredible places happening there. Those on YouTube, please stay tuned, but we will be back in 20 minutes. Those in the room, grab a drink, go meet the startups. Cheers! Alcoholics, remove yourself from the bar, please.
Bring the bar here.
That would be too dangerous. All right, let's grab our final seats. Come join us from the front if you can. Come join us from the front. Don't hide at the back, please. Alright, guys at the back, come grab a seat. No need to stand. I know there's going to be plenty more beers, I promise. Alright, we're going to kick straight back on. Everyone got a beer? Everyone drunk up? Seeing lots of nods. Seeing someone with 3 beers over here. You're ready? Prepared? Okay, we're going to go straight into our next speaker. A fun fact about our next speaker, the organisation themselves actually won the AI Summit Award last year as the best AI startup. So to tell you more about them, status today, I'm going to invite Anka to the stage. Can you get a round of applause, Anka?
Can you all hear me? Oh, you can. I don't really need the mic. It's like 50 people, but maybe for YouTube. How many people do we have on YouTube, by the way? Do we know? 150. That's 10 more people than I had last time. So that's okay. You know, sometimes you do or Facebook live stream stuff. Brilliant. Okay, my name is Ankar Modi. I am the CEO and co-founder of Status Today. What we will talk about is, it might be very serious, it might be completely non-serious. We'll see how it goes. I don't predict anything. But what I can tell you is we'll talk about employee analytics. We'll talk about the power of using data to drive the future of work. But not in a generic way, because you know everyone talks about data, everyone talks about AI. We talk a lot about how can you use data to transform the work. We'll go very specific. We will talk about employee-related data, so it's going to be very controversial. Probably half of you will completely disagree with me, and that is a good thing, because I don't think we have a consensus on this within the company, let alone in the industry. So we'll work on that. There's a fun fact, and you know this is very iconic because we are at Capgemini, but the industry currently spends roughly, just about roughly, $250 billion on consulting. So companies out there in the world who are hiring consultants for all sorts of projects, they're spending about $250 billion. It's a lot of money, you know. I wouldn't mind some of it, but it's really a ridiculous amount. Not because it has basically led to the birth of the entire consulting industry, but more because this number doesn't make sense. This number is not spent on solving problems. It's actually spent on collecting information about the problems, which is where it gets really weird. And the question then becomes is, why is the world spending $250 billion on the consulting sector? What is it that they're trying to solve? What they're trying to solve is the fact that they deal with really broken companies. And why is the modern company broken? You know, it's very convenient for a startup founder to come on stage and say, everything is bad, everything is broken, we will fix it because, you know, we know the answer. Maybe. I don't know if we know the answer. But what we do know is the reason companies are broken because they used to not be broken. And things changed, and it's hard to change that at the same speed for companies. So the same unbroken company is now broken because that hierarchy that worked very well for Cleopatra no longer works in the world where we need squads. Because, yeah, well, you know, I don't know if Cleopatra would have approved in Egypt to have squads of people working independently. But it does work in the modern company. And so on and so forth. We've created debt, financial debt, which is mostly around how we handle money, how we handle expenses. We are spending more money in places we shouldn't as companies and less money in places we should. But that's a very convenient thing to suggest. So, you know, every first meeting I've ever had with a vendor, it always began the same way, that you're spending money the wrong way. Like, really, that's useful. but you can't really fix that until you realize the true problem. The second is technical debt. We talked about digital being the first language of the world. We talked about how we are becoming more digital, but what we fail to realize is 99% of all companies in the world still struggle to go digital. Forget AI, forget data, forget, I don't know, go even using email. They are still talking about digital. So I had this conversation, I'm not going to name, one of the largest companies out there. We talked about what we do, and we explained that we are an AI company, we do employee analytics, we do all of it. And they said, so you're about this big data thing. We are the big data thing. Big data was a keyword that was coined about 15 years ago. It was big about 10 years ago. 5 years ago, people stopped using it. But we are the big data thing. It was a reality check because AI is already far beyond comprehension, and we are struggling to understand AI. But here's a fun fact, we don't need to understand how AI works. I'll give you a very funny analogy. We all have phones, iPhones, Samsung phones, Huawei, or whatever that might be. I would argue that 99.9% of us, me included by the way, for the most part don't know how these phones work. You take your phone out, you take a picture, there's more software in that picture than hardware. You talk to Siri, well, it just makes sense, right? You talk to Siri and she understands what you're saying. How does that work? Your smartphone has more technology that you don't understand than you do understand. And yet we accept it and somehow we swear by it. We will sell the iPhone to our friends saying it is the best piece of technology ever. We have no idea how it works, but we know how it transforms the way we work. And that is critical in the way and the path to AI. We don't, and I'll probably be very controversial in saying this, we don't have to understand how AI works. We have to understand how AI impacts us and how we will live through it. So no, not everyone needs to know the machine learning behind it, the data models behind it. It's good to challenge it, but that's not necessary. 70% of that money, by the way, that's spent, $250 billion, is spent on data discovery. It's not spent on solving problems. If you're trying to go digital, if you're trying to move to email, if you're trying to reduce email, if you're trying to go to Slack, well, most of the time is actually spent figuring out what the problem is, and even worse, most of that time is spent on just talking to people, trying to do surveys, trying to gather information. Well, 70% is a lot of time spent on not solving the problem. It's good because the end invoice looks better, but it's a broken system because we're not aware of why this is a problem. When we look at the best companies in the world, the best companies in the world have created people analytics or internal analytics teams. It started by just looking at analytics all up, but now they're looking at how can we collect internal information about how my company operates. Where are the bottlenecks? Who are the influences? Which teams are doing well? Which teams are not doing well? We're using data to do that. Not using HR, not using surveys, not using... there's so many weird ways of doing it. And that allows these companies to dramatically become more efficient. Google is one of the world's most respected companies, not because Google changed the world the way we live in, but because Google operates in a very different manner to most companies. Google believes in data. I did a talk about a week and a half ago now at Facebook, and it was quite interesting because they started the whole event by saying at Facebook, we say data wins arguments. You can't argue with data. Well, yeah, you can't argue with data, but data needs context, right, to some degree. So when it comes to internal transformation, workplace transformation, the debt I talk about, having a team internally that reduces that 70% of the time, one, reduces cost, no doubt, but two, more critically, allows you to become faster, better, more efficient, more agile, deal with changes as they come. The problem is it doesn't really work because the current way of data collection, when I refer to data, internal data is you go to IT, you ask for some information, maybe you don't go to IT, you have some access to data, you've collected it 3 years ago and you swear by it, but the world has changed in 3 years. But you go to the meeting and say, I talked to 10 product managers and this is how it works, trust me, I talked to them. Well, you might have, but there's another 90 of them you did not talk to. And that's a problem with sampling, that's a problem with the modern data collection. It's very survey driven. We rely on sample driven data. So if I ask any question to all of you, it will still not be accurate because there's the rest of the world out there who might completely disagree with you. In the world of Facebook, in the world of Tesla, we live in echo chambers, right? The world that we think is real is our world, and our world is no longer shared by other people, meaning that everyone has their world. So what is your reality is not everyone else's reality. We looked at overworking, we looked at stress, we looked at overload all up. And what we found was the status quo is very different. So if I said the norm is where the average is, and I took, let's say, the legal sector or the banking sector in London, well, then the average employee works about 80 hours a week. Well, that's not really normal, is it? So that echo chamber is very powerful, and we have to understand that when we collect data, that our data will not tell us what we want it to tell us. It will not tell us what it should tell us. In fact, sometimes it will tell us the wrong things, and that's okay. That's normal. So we have to rethink data collection to be more neutral, more objective. We have to stop doing surveys, when it comes to internal activity. I could do a survey to figure this out, but if I just left you with a very common note, how often do you fill surveys honestly? You have these surveys at work, you have those pulse surveys, you have all those surveys. One, you never really fill them honestly. Two, when you do fill them honestly, there's a general remark that happens at the end of it. Yeah, I know, I put it in there, but I know no one is reading, no one's watching, no one gives a damn. Nothing's going to change, is it? Because you've been frustrated by the lack of visibility, the lack of action on top of that survey. And the reason for that is not because the company, the organization doesn't want it, but because it's really hard to action that kind of data. It's very transactional, it's very point in time. If it's raining in London, survey results will be bad. If it's sunny in London, survey results are going to be good. People are happy, people are sad. I spent a good few years at Microsoft, and for the most part, I wouldn't say always, whenever we had a survey, I had a chocolate on my desk. But it was a day before I had the survey. Somehow I was always in a good mood, I like chocolates. There are ways to influence this that we need to address data. Let's just put it that way. I can go on forever on that. With smart data collection, we can use AI. We can really rethink how we analyze behavior, how we analyze activity. But we need to understand that in the right way. There's a lot of wrong ways to collect this data. The employee analytics industry as a whole, because it's very new, but it can radically transform the biggest assets we've got, which is people in a company. It can radically transform wellness and well-being. People who are overworked and under-efficient because they're overworked, we can address that. We can address engagement if you're trying to increase engagement. We can address collaborations. We can look into things like layoffs, mergers, M&As. So if you're merging two companies, how do you make sure they're actually integrating? Can you identify duplication? Have you just fired the person who was responsible for connecting two parts of the organization, and that without the person, you've literally disconnected an entire chunk of the company, which happens all the time. We can do that. We can fix that by collecting the right data. The challenge here is, you have to only collect metadata that matters. You don't want to start spying on people. You don't want to start monitoring employees. Nothing's worse than having someone watching over you the entire time. We have to trust people to do their job. So instead of measuring input, you measure output. And the difference is, you shouldn't care if people spend 8 hours on Facebook, if for the 1 hour that they do work, they get the same stuff done as someone who spends 10 hours not on Facebook. It's a mind shift change. It doesn't matter how many hours they spend in the office, if they're flexibly working or otherwise, if they get the same job done, if the team is efficient, if the team is not. What we found more and more is the more flexible people work, the more they work. Flexible working has time and again conclusively shown to be worse for work-life balance and not better. It actually was really good when you clocked into the factory, you did your job, clocked out, you're done. You couldn't work from home. But now you're always online, you're never online. And the people who are most flexibly working, who don't have fixed hours, tend to work significantly longer on the average day than the people who don't. So that's kind of opposite of what we're trying to achieve there. What that allows us to do is then look at activity trends, because these trends will tell us how things happen, how things are changing. Change is more valuable in data than absolute. And I'll tell you what that means. In the medical industry, this has been done really well. So when you go to a doctor, the doctor looks at your pulse, the temperature, the blood pressure. How in the world is the blood pressure or temperature related to a virus infection? They don't tell anything. But in the field, it is a proxy signal that if you are infected, if you are sick, these things will change. These are fundamental values about our body that tell us something is happening or something is not happening. And the change is what they're looking for. If you're Michael Phelps, your resting pulse rate is significantly lower than if you're me, because my resting pulse is nowhere close to Michael Phelps. Probably too much stress. But that acknowledgement that you used to be at this baseline and now you've gone up, gone down, is very important when it comes to activity. When you do that and then you use AI to actually use that analysis, the change analysis, you can actually do a lot. The change analysis is only useful if you do that in a categorical manner. So you cannot do that for one person, you cannot do that for one company, you have to do that across the industry. because then that allows you to benchmark. So if you say my heartbeat is 322, what does that mean? Is 322 good, bad, normal? Do other people have 322? But now if I tell you Michael Phelps sits at 32, suddenly I'm too high. So that relative comparison is critical for any data. And that's one of the approaches we started taking, and we said, is the future of work a place where people share data? HR shares data. HR is the most secretive organization when it comes to companies. Being able to share good and bad allows us to say, is this normal for people to behave in this way? Is it normal that my most performing people are 3 times as much overworked as my least performing people? How normal is it compared to my competitors, my people, my industry, or if you're a large enough company, my London office, my New York office, and so on and so forth. The heart of all of this, employee privacy. It's very easy to cross the chasm and basically say, let's capture everything, let's monitor everything. That's not good. It's not going to work. Well, there are technical reasons why that's a bad idea, but at the heart of it, that's counterproductive. What we need is an architecture, a design that fundamentally doesn't allow for that. So while you need to know from liability, for legal, for other reasons, when stuff happens, you don't always need to know what's in the stuff. You don't need to know what's in the email. You might need to know there is an email. If someone is abusing the work email to send to a client something abusive, you need to know that that happened, but you don't always need to read the stuff. You don't always need to read the file, and so on and so forth. So it's very critical to understand that there are boundaries. Privacy is not simple. It's a very, very complicated topic. If anything, we've learned in the last few years that this is not an easy one to solve. In an ideal world, we have a lot of privacy. But here's the fun fact. If you had all the privacy in the world, you have no transparency. You know nothing about your colleague, you know nothing about your manager, you know nothing about your team. So in a workplace where there's no transparency, how do you get stuff done? So what is the trade-off between transparency and privacy? So you go to your manager and say, I want you to be honest with me. Tell me what's going on. Tell me why you're making the decisions as you are. Imagine going to a bank and the bank tells you, we've lost your money. And one of our employees stole it, we think. Like, okay, who stole it? We don't know, we can't look at it, privacy. Well, you need to, it's my money. But, so there are accountabilities at play. And this privacy transparency battle is going to go on for a very long time. It's nowhere close to being settled. This is what the average day in most of your companies looks like. I'm going to do a really rapid fire case study right now so everyone sees how this becomes tangible and real. You have a morning, you have a peak in the morning, people slow down. Most of us work more in the evening, late evenings, than we work in early mornings. So 3 a.m. is rarer than 11 p.m., just to say. But this does not look the same for everyone. We have to acknowledge and understand that people are different. So if you're an admin assistant, if you're a salesperson, if you're an engineer, they look dramatically different. No one-size-fits-all approach. In data, there's a phrase that we use, lack of data is data. It's a very funny one. Again, I'm going to take a medical analogy. Lack of a heartbeat is a very, very valid data point. You don't want that. But if you're looking at email traffic, lack of data around developers is a good thing. You don't want your developers to be spending a lot of time on email. If you're looking at salespeople, lack of email traffic is a bad thing because you want them to be active. So context is important, and categorization is. We'll go through a quick thing around cross-team engagement and collaboration on how you can use activity metadata around files, around emails, not installing stuff on softwares to measure this kind of stuff. So we'll compare product managers and engineers. What you're looking at now is a typical engineer's engagement and collaboration. I'll zoom in a little bit. This is what a typical engineer's collaboration circle looks like. They talk to a few people who in turn talk to a few people. If you look at the engineering org, you'll kind of identify the typical patterns. As you go further, you look at product manager and say, how does it differ to product managers? Because they're a very different kind of role. And it doesn't take long to realize product managers look dramatically different. They are a lot more collaborative, they involve a lot more people, they talk to a lot more influencers, they themselves tend to be bigger influencers, and so on and so forth. As you do that, it allows you for the first time ever using real time. This is not analyzed data that takes 9 months to analyze. This is happening in real time. This might be yesterday. You're looking at people who are influencers in your organization. So if you're trying to change the way people work, you have a policy change, workplace change, organizational change, you identify these central change agents. The most impactful change agents, the influencers, are not managers and they're not leaders. They are your average employees who just tend to have that, I don't know, everyone believes in them. We all have people around us who we just somehow trust, believe. They have gravitas, or they have, I don't know, maybe there's a secret sauce. I need to crack it these days. But you can identify that. it doesn't work alone. You know, analytics will not tell you everything you need. You need experts, you need partners. When we do identify the problem, you need to call the consultants to fix it. But don't call the consultants to find it. And the best part about it is, this is the first time you can measure return on investment. So when someone says, we will fix it, you can monitor that number going down or up or otherwise. That change that I talked about, this is where it kicks in. All the actions you take in organizations going forward can be benchmarked to the competitors and to the industry, and you can measure change as it happens. We'll skip this one. It's not that relevant. Why am I credible enough to talk about it? Well, mostly because we created an AI-powered employee insights platform. And the reason we are credible is because we have benchmarked, we have analyzed, we have more than that number is old now. We have more than 500 companies live from every continent on the world. We've got several countries in play, we've got several actions in play. It allows us to say, is this activity that you're seeing normal? Normal to the industry, normal to the world? How is it supposed to change? How does it change? Are these people who are overworked really overworked or not? Let's help you fix that. Best of all, who are the bad managers in your organization? Who are the managers who are consistently and reliably creating overwork for other people ineffectively for the most part? How can we help you address that, benchmark that, and fix that? There are big concerns. There are two very, very big concerns that we are aware of, and there's more probably that will come up later. One is around data or insights. We are obsessed with data. Data is useless. Probably that's a bad thing to say. Data is useless because, you know, insights are what matters. What you make out of that data is what matters. There's a lot of data. Most of us have access to more data that we can make sense of. How do you make actions out of that data? But it's not an easy decision. Do you choose data or do you choose insights? It's a hard one. And then the biggest one of them all, is it privacy or is it transparency? The more AI you use, the more data you use, are you going to see everything? Are you going to see something? But if you see nothing, then how do you become better? So if the Secret Service says, I have no idea what the president is going to do tomorrow, he doesn't like to be public, it's private, that's not going to work. But at the same time, knowing everything doesn't work either. So how do you draw a line in design terms, in thought leadership terms, and enforce that is just absolutely a phenomenal discussion to have. That's why if you remember that debt, the technical debt, the organizational debt, the digital debt, you want to become digital and otherwise, it's not an easy one to solve, but the only way to solve it is to stop forcing people into old methodology. The future of work is not going to radically change because we will use different machines, different devices. Maybe we'll still use Windows and Mac, I don't know, I don't really care. But the future of work involves the average manager understanding their employees better. And that is why we will not spend $250 billion on the consulting. We probably as a company will take a good chunk of that. But that's okay. That's kind of the other part of the goal. It's not related to return. But you know, that's essentially it. These problems are yet to be solved, and that's okay. I wouldn't be worried too much about it because, you know, these problems are not going to be solved tomorrow. Don't try to solve them tomorrow because it's too hasty. The future of workplace is data-driven, it is efficient, it does use employee analytics, it is scary and it is controversial, and it will happen. There is no way to avoid it. We can choose to do it right, like self-driving cars, or we can choose to do it wrong and be in denial, and because we are in London, I can say this, let China do it. Well, that's not going to work. It's going to happen one way or the other. Can't do surveys, can't do spreadsheets, can't do meetings, and definitely cannot do 2-year-long consulting projects that end up in a PowerPoint. That's not good. That's all I have, I think. Well, that's all I have. Oh, that's my last slide. Thank you. I just wanted to share what I believe the future of work looks like for hundreds and thousands and millions of companies as we go forward in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, cheers. So we're going to move over to our final speaker of the night. I'm going to welcome up Julia from Atlassian. We get a huge round of applause for Julia.
Hello, everybody. So, who knows Atlassian here? So, what do you know? Jira? Confluence? All right. So, you expect maybe that I'm going to speak about the products, how you use the product demo? Nothing. Don't speak about the products. What I'd like to talk about today is more how we deal with our culture, how the teams are doing. We actually have a team internally in Atlassian. We have, at the moment, a little over 2,800 people at Atlassian. And so we have a team that is focusing just on studying how teams are working together and what works, what doesn't work, what can be improved, And so they go on and test things. So what I'd like to do tonight is share with you what we found and maybe give some ideas. Who knows? So first of all, Atlassian from the beginning, because we do software for teams, so we say our motto is unleash the potential of every team. So give tools to the people that can help them work better, work more efficiently, and also work as more happily individuals. One thing is not just about efficiency, and we see this more and more. We need teams to be able to introspect, learn, and improve. So being able to adapt and become better. In order to do that, you have several things. You need the people, you need the process, you need the products. So we do provide, as Atlassian, the tools. We do provide advice on the process, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about the people and the culture. So one of the things that we found that works very well is the concept of open. We found that analyzing as teams are working, that many times culture is siloed. So we say we are used to hear culture is power, knowledge is power, which is true, but knowledge is power for the individual. We want the power for the team, we want the power for the whole organization. So when you install Confluence, for example, everything is open. We want the knowledge to be open. We want the knowledge to flow freely between the teams. We want people to be able to express how they feel. They want people to express what they think of the products freely. We all heard that, for example, in a brainstorming situation, if you take the whole group, we heard that what the group is able to express is more than the sum of every single individual. And in fact, that's not true. In most situations, if you take every individual by himself and you put the sum together, they will be able to express more ideas, more new proposals, more than the whole group. Why? Because the group, there is control, there is censorship, the people are afraid of express their own idea, they feel stupid, they feel somebody's going to judge them. So that is true only if you are in a kind of environment that you can feel safe to express your own ideas. And that's the concept of open knowledge, open feedback, being able to come to the office and being what you are, with all your difference, with your cultural difference, with your sexual difference, your cultural difference, whatever. Just being the person that you are and come to the office. So that's one of the things that we try to promote at Atlassian, the concept of open. It goes into the tools, it goes into the process, it goes into HR, many things around that. So, but it's not just the theory. We try, let's go a little bit. We have concrete things. So one of the things is, I think you asked that at Capgemini is the hackathon. We call it Ship It at Atlassian. So it's one day, we do that once every 3 months for every quarter. So every people gets together around an idea. An idea can be improve a product, bring on a new feature, improve the process, develop a new feature for the non-profit organization, whatever. And people from all over the teams, every team, marketing, HR, user experience, whatever, they work together, and they get to know each other. They get to know the challenges, the day-to-day of other people, and they work for new things for one day. And that's good. Sometimes, like Jira Service Desk is our product we use for IT. Initially, the idea came from one of those. And also, it's very good for the culture. Another thing is our values. So I don't know if anybody that knows Atlassian ever heard about those values. The funny story that when I first applied for Atlassian job, I went through the interviews and all the technical, everything was fine. And somebody asked me, what do you think about the Atlassian values? Like, what values? I didn't get the job. This is because, I got it later, of course. This is because this is really at the heart of Atlassian. When we go through our 6 months evaluation in terms of performance, you need to find things that you did well, and you need to trace those back to the values. So it's not just ideas. It's really at the heart of how the company grows, how the company is managed. Open company, no bullshit, for us means that you bring the information inside the company. You don't have any lobbying inside the company. You don't do internal marketing. Information is open. You bring the information as it is. You need to be transparent. Play as a team, of course. It speaks by itself. Build with heart and balance. You put your heart, but you keep the balance. Keep balance meaning also being somebody good to work with. So with your team. And be the change you seek. It speaks by itself. Don't fuck the customers. That's one thing, and we do use it. Sometimes in internal conversation, somebody will say, okay, now we have this problem, let's do this. And somebody will raise his hand and say, oh, what about don't fuck the customer? I mean, that's the real thing. So we try, at least we try to keep it alive, and it's part of our mission. And then there are other things. Location. So we have different offices, so bring together different cultures, different way of seeing things. Encourage and open the way for remote workers. I work from Grenoble. There is no office in France. My office is in Amsterdam, so I work from home. And we recently acquired a company which is Trello. Probably you know about that. 75% of the people in Trello work remotely. So they do have a culture around that. Every time you do a meeting, you provide tools for remote people to work with that. So you share content only over the VC and everything else. You need to organize your work so the remote workers can work with that. Innovation, of course. People like innovation. They interact with innovation in their private life. They want it at work too. And the struggle around talents. And that's not only for Atlassian, of course, but you need to attract talent, so you need to bring meaning to the work. You need to bring good conditions. You need to allow them to work from home if they want. So there's all things that compound to create a culture that is really helping people. But one interesting thing is that most companies, that's what we found analyzing ourselves in the first place. We were measuring in every way how the company is doing, financial, everything. We were measuring how individuals were doing, but we are not measuring how teams were doing. Whereas teams are the heart of our organization. So we say, wait a second. What do we need to have a high-performing team? Well, some of those things, share understanding, balance in terms of capability, skills, attitude, personal way of interacting, a lot of things. What are the values? How do we measure? What is important for us? In 2015, there is a research that was made by Google, and they were looking for identifying what were the metrics, what are the characteristics of a high-performing team. So they were expecting to find a blend of personal skill, technical skill, and what they found, what really matters is the way the team interacts together, how decisions are made. Is the team able to take a decision autonomously? Are they able to change the spec of the component they are working on? All those things are really much more of a higher impact than personal skills. And we found the same thing. So we came about and we built a framework, which we call the Team Playbook, which is available on our website. So you can go there and download it. And what it is. There is actually two parts to it. One is the monitors. Some more clicks than expected. One is the health monitors, which is a way of having a judgment, a view on how the team is doing, and I will go more in depth on that. And the other one, once we know how the team is doing, how can we improve? So the monitors. First of all, for the moment, we have three kinds of teams. It's managing teams, project teams, like developer teams, and then service teams, like ops teams, consultant teams, whatever. And then we have 8 categories, and then you will find questions for each one of those categories. And then you get the team together, and you will ask the team those questions. And everyone will vote for either something we are doing well, something we are not doing well, something we are doing so and so. And once you have done that, we try to come to a common judgment, common to the team. Of course, the team cannot be like 25 people, 7, 8 people is probably the maximum to have a meaningful discussion. And so you come to a situation like that where you can see for each category how you are doing. So for example, you are saying for effective partnership, how we are partnering with other teams inside the company, we probably have some problems around there. Reporting and analytics, maybe. So based on that, we go to the place part and we find and we work on the place. So we can work if you have problems about analytics, about measuring, we can work on the AKR. We have, there is a lot of plays, so I encourage you, if you are interested, go to the website and check it out. For example, we have interesting play also just as an experience. There is one we call pre-mortem for project teams. So let's say you are going to launch a new product, a new features in 3 months from now. So you split the team in two. One team will work on the hypothesis that the launch is a success. And they are saying, okay, let's list all the reasons why it is a success. Other half of the team, opposite situation. It's a complete failure. Why? And they list. And then we come back together and we compare, we discuss, and we try to learn something before the actual launch really happens. It's an interesting exercise. Post-mortem is, well, that's more common, but it's interesting post-mortem. Like, for example, we had an incident in production, and we get together and we try, how do we react? What do we do? Did we try to get the person who screwed the whole thing up? Or did we try to understand why the system didn't react in the right way? You will learn about the organization. If the main goal is to find the head to chop off, then you are probably in an organization that is not really, didn't really understand how incidents arrive in a production environment. So, many different ideas, and it can be interesting. So in the package, what you can find on our website, you find all the questions, you find the descriptions of the play, how to run them. So it's interesting. You have there is a Confluence blueprint, so you can have in your Confluence website. There are PowerPoint PDF files. You can run it on the board. If you have with remote teams, you can use Trello, of course. So everybody votes for something, then you put it together. Different ways of doing that. And we found we do it regularly. The idea is to do it regularly, so you see over the time how your team is evolving. It's just one tool. It's not like nothing magic, but it helps the team reflecting, introspecting, and finding way to improve. In the values, it was one value with be the change you seek. But be the change means also knowing what kind of change can be useful, knowing what I'm not doing well. So, before you need to understand, and then you can act. And that's a suggestion how you can act. So, summarize, you need to have goals, because you need to have an identity. In organization, you need to have an identity of some kind. And it's not just theory, it must be something that is lived. From the top down, from the bottom up. You need really something that is lived, that I was saying, it is lived, of course, to some extent. And then you need to execute on that vision. You need to measure how you are doing to your goals, concretely. And then so you decide what I'm monitoring, how I'm working. The same approach that most of the companies are doing for the company-wise, but on the teams level, on how the people interact together, how they work together. And there are many technical, there is a very interesting book that was published. There is the Puppet Foundation. They do a DevOps report where they analyze software organizations, how they perform. And they published the book Accelerate, where they made a summary of what they found. And it's very interesting to see how practices like a continuous delivery, what's the impact on the culture, how you categorize the culture, and what's the impact on specific practices. So there is a lot of things, but that can be applied once you know what is key for your organization. So once you know what are the values, once you know what is important and how the teams are doing, then you can see, okay, let's see how DevOps is doing, what's the impact, what capabilities I need to push into my organization if I want to go towards that goal. So, but first of all, you need to have a global view. That's all. I hope you had some ideas. Maybe if you want to continue the discussion, I'll be around, so don't hesitate.
Perfect. So, can you hear me? Yeah, it's on. We're going to move into the final piece of the evening. We're going to start us off into our panel discussion. I'm going to ask all our external guests that have been speaking this evening to come on up. So, coming up, Atlassian, Notel, I believe we've got James as well joining us. Obviously, come on up and join us up here. And I'm conscious the beers are getting warm, so we're going to do this quite rapid fire. We're going to do about 10 to 15 minutes open Q&A. Think about your questions, and then we'll get back to some drinks and nibbles.
Go for it. I'll take that one.
Why did they have chosen the wrong spot?
But it's good. All the questions will come there.
Yeah.
All right.
I might be able to see anything. I'm going to need some sunglasses. You're the same.
So, chaps, I'm going to kick us off with the first question, and I'm going to open it up to the audience. You all spoke about different areas around the physical world and how it's changing for employees, and then finally, actually the tools that we use. You gave elements of the vision in terms of where you see these things going. My question is ultimately, what do you see as the biggest blocker in that new world, and what do you think we as individuals, us as organisations, need to do to get past those? You want to say it first?
I've kind of got a bit of a... I've got a little bit of a question that relates to this, because obviously remote working is great and different environments are great, but actually we're still humans and herd animals, and it's really important to still actually collaborate together and get genuine sort of FaceTime and meet with each other. So how on earth do you sort of manage that with, you mentioned this huge proportion of the Trello workforce that are working remotely. Are they not missing something, and is that not a massive void for the people that are working for them? And also, does it not potentially restrict the pool from which you can recruit?
So I can speak about my experience because I work remotely myself.
Yeah. And
so, yes, I do feel the void. I do feel more challenging work remotely every day. I mean, if you can choose, one day I go to the office, one day I work at home, that's the perfect situation. But I don't have that. So I do feel the challenge. And I'm not saying that is the ideal situation. I'm saying that in order to be able to, I prefer as a company to attract a talent working from home than attracting somebody less interesting for my company, matching less from the cultural, technical, functional, just because he's living in the place where I have the office. So if I want to attract the skill, I need to open to that. And then I need to do as much as possible to allow that person to be into the culture, to be into the organization, to come to the office as soon as he can do that. So it's a challenge, and we are still in a way of, we try all the time to find ways to make that with technologies, VC technologies and the chat and whatever technology, make it easier. But I agree that it's not really the ideal. And I personally try many things, go to co-working spaces, participate on local initiatives, innovation initiatives, just to keep the passion, to keep the wanting to change things. So.
I think this is entirely correct, and I think what it means for the physical space, and to your question is, we need to make the physical workplace more compelling for disparate talent that is spread out working around remotely, to want to come into the space. That's a challenge because their needs change over time. Physicality of that challenge is something that we've solved through the agility and modularity of what we do. But to your question, the blockers to that are the traditional ways of owning space and leasing space are slow, 10-year, difficult contracts. The simplification of the lubrication of that, amelioration of that is what we do.
Okay.
I actually agree with a lot of this. It's just interesting because if you look at distributed teams, I mean, distributed teams are phenomenally interesting because there are two sets. There are companies who approach distributed in their DNA, and actually, you know, my co-founder is a fan of Atlassian, by the way. He would be, never mind. He'd be so happy. But that said, most companies who've gone distributed and they've added flexible or remote working to their benefits have failed dramatically. So the average manager, and I kid you not, we've talked to so many, does not believe in flexible working. They offer it as a benefit, but they're scared. They're like, oh no, from a PR perspective, we can't say we don't support it. But nah, they're at home, not working. They're not working. So it's a very different mindset. So I think the challenge is to understand that flexible working doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't work for all roles. It doesn't work for all jobs. In what circumstances does it work? How do you make it work? Can you provide the tools? Can you provide accountability? I mean, imagine if you're working from home, how do you provide the employee with the KPIs to be self-measuring, so to say, because you need them to be independent? Do they need you to sign off on everything? In which case, of course, they're ineffective because they need you to sign off on everything. You're not online all the time because you're busy in meetings. Well, if you're busy in meetings because you think you're being busy, and of course you're doing a good job, or at least you think you are, then the remote worker is stuck. At the end of the year, they get a bad review, and then basically you claim remote working doesn't work. So, I don't know. I mean, I think remote working is, as a concept, too general of an umbrella. I think we need to split remote working into categories that does work and don't work. I mean, I don't know if I want all our engineers to be remote. I like talking to them. Actually, I like meeting them sometimes.
Sometimes.
Most days.
Yeah, let's go to the crowd. First question in the back.
Can I ask a question? Hi. So my name is Petros, and I'm an academic at work at the University of Sussex, and I do research in the area of virtual teams and remote working. So in my research, I found personally that in virtual teams, it's the social aspects that are absent. And when I simulate situations with my students, they and I put them together with other students from universities in different countries for the duration of the semester to work on a project, they just focus on the task itself and they forget everything else. And that's why they fail. And that's how we reflect and we learn it, blah, blah, blah. So my question to perhaps to all of you, but also to Julia specifically, is because you mentioned you're a remote worker yourself. And of course there are different types of remote working. But does your company have the systems in place to support the well-being and the social aspects of working remotely for its employees?
Yeah. Social, no, I agree with what you say. So the social part is the more problematic one. And we, like, if we speak about Trello, the company was saying that 75% of the workers are remote. They do have social events, online social events. From my point of view, that doesn't really work. Because as you say, I'm a human being, you know, I like human beings. So social for me is outside of Atlassian unless I go, and that's a key part. You need to come to the office from time to time. If you are just, you know, staying 6 months away, at some point the people will don't even know if you are still alive or not. I mean, and so, you know, social part is a tougher part. At the same time, I realize also, because also I work in other environments that were very different from Atlassian, sometimes the social part is negative. So I also had the situation where I go to the office Monday morning and you want to kill yourself just because, you know, you had a coffee with your colleagues and it's so bad. So it's not, I mean, it can be bad.
It's quite morbid.
Well, it happens. Or you feel depressed just because nothing is happening and everybody just keeps speaking about the fact that all is going bad. No. So that's the challenging part. My company does have a structure to give you the ability to be effective on the task, which is already a very good thing. And then gives you the ability to go to the office when you need, even if you don't have any special reason to go there, just, you know, to meet the people, hang out at night with the people, or whatever, you know, being a human being with your colleagues. And also, from my point of view, I work as a solution engineer, so and I work a lot of, you know, trying to speak about DevOps and agility. So I do work with local organizations, local events to bring my work. So I do interact with other people even outside of Atlassian, speaking about Atlassian, or maybe not even speaking about Atlassian, just agility and DevOps.
Any other speakers' point of view on the question, or?
I think that's phenomenal, because what you've called out is as honest as it gets. Productivity can be high. Sometimes you want social, and I absolutely agree with you. We have a really amazing team in Ukraine right now, and we regularly meet them physically. We have absolutely no need. They're so productive without us. But it's like, I think the sales people had it nailed down a long time ago. They said, sometimes you just have to meet your customer face to face. Emails, calls, video wouldn't cut it. Yeah.
Chris?
I think it's quite. You can put what you just said quite simply. That one size doesn't fit all, and one approach doesn't fit all, and it's not always. You don't always want to be in the same place every day, every time. I think also that flexibility is flexible working is so strongly associated with co-working, which I think actually leads you down the wrong path. Because if you are going to run a flexible remote team, people are going to work flexibly, you want to have a really strong culture at HQ, in your office, in your workplace. And it's, I think a lot of companies have gone down the path of giving people access to co-working space, where their staff are then sort of diluted into the co-working spaces culture and the other businesses in that spaces culture. One of the things that we've learned, our customers come to us because we create full floor office space for our customers. We create an office space that reflects our customers' culture and our customers' style and our customers' design and the way that our customers want to work. So businesses within our space, flexible space, can create their own corporate culture, and it can be a powerful corporate culture, which can then attract people into the space so that they don't feel like they're ready to slit their wrists when they speak to their colleagues every morning. But at the same time, it's a flexible space, so if their workforce find they need to work more remotely more of the time, we can accommodate that.
Cool. Question over there, grab there, and then we'll come here next, is that cool? Yeah, shout as loud as you can.
Okay, so this is a question just mainly for Anchor. So taking a step away from data about teams from an organizational perspective, what do you see kind of progression in terms of how we can use data for individuals to kind of track their own productivity or their effectiveness? And yeah.
We should bring you into the team. I did not start the company to make other companies better. I started the company because I genuinely, honestly think we can make individuals better. And I'll give you a very simple example. We all go to work and sometimes we are told we're not doing a good job, or we are underperforming, and we know we are underperforming. Imagine having a databases to compare yourself to the role model. So imagine this role model, and most of us have a role model internal to the companies we work in. We all have someone we look at 3 teams away from us, or our manager's manager, whatever that might be, who tends to be just like a superstar. So if I could compare you to that person and show you categorically that it's not just about the fact that you're working hard or they're working hard, there's some fundamental differences, I could honestly give you a data basis of improving in the long run. The true value of the data we have is for the individual, on one hand, to improve, but on the other hand, it empowers people who are not traditionally savvy. And what I mean by that is, we all know about the shy employee who doesn't speak out. He's doing a great job, but never gets promoted. And that's not good for business. So now if you knew benchmark speaking, you're doing better than the rest, you can actually challenge the status quo. So from an employee perspective, in an ideal world, I want the employees to drive this data. They can challenge management, the company, they can create accountability. So then you go, if you want to join, because we're at Capgemini, let's talk consulting for a second. If you want to join a consulting firm, you can challenge them and ask them, how do you differ to the other ones? I saw databases speaking, you might be better than the rest, but you might not be number 1 yet. Should I then just go to the other one? And it's very hard to argue with this because you empower the individual. It's a bit creepy then though, because not everyone likes the idea. But I would like to have data about myself to be able to challenge people. When you go to a new job, imagine not needing a CV. You take your activity history and just show, when I write to people, they write back. It's simple as that. You can prove it. I mean, what CV will ever do that? You can convince as much as you want, data speaks. It can be very powerful. You have to do it right, but it can be very powerful.
Here's a question, there's one here, and then we'll go back.
Yeah, Cesar Jerry from Horizon Global Real Estate and Dean of Corporate Strategy. I mean, you all talked about the present of work, right? A lot of the things that are going on today, we all know about flexible office space, agile teams. I'm really interested to find out, what do you think of the future? What the future will really look like? With all the trends that we've got, human ability of the workplace, bringing people together, FOSS, and technology, like 5G. Where do you think this is going?
Each speaker, 30 seconds.
I mean, I would give one or probably two-line answer because it's probably better experts to talk about it. I think the future of work is going to basically just remove the concept of work itself, because the idea of work is only defined when you can differentiate it. So, you don't work from fixed offices anymore, you don't work for fixed devices anymore, you don't work in fixed hours anymore, no fixed location. Most of your work might be automated, you might be a digital AI. It's going to get very confusing, but the future of work at the heart of it will be value driven. So, knowledge, if you're an expert, like imagine hiring a design person. The way we feel about design people these days, you spend 3 days coming up with that color. That probably is how the work is going to look like in the future for us, because if you don't spend 3 days thinking, then someone has automated it.
I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle, because I do talk about this with sort of friends quite a lot. I'm a father of a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old daughter, 2 daughters, and actually a lot of this comes down to where I think education needs to point. And I think the future of work, those that are going to be successful, there's obviously going to be AI and machine learning and automation and everything else, but we need to double down on the stuff that makes us innately human. We need to look at the creativity, the stuff that we don't even understand anywhere near enough ourselves to even start programming for that. And we need to embrace the stuff that does that, that makes it. So my 3-year-old starts school next year, and a lot of the headmasters are proud to show us their brand new room with the fact that they're going to teach coding and this, that and the other, and unfortunately that's too late because the computers are learning to code themselves. So they need to look more around the creativity, the interaction between humans, whether that's remotely, importantly, actually how do you do that? The study you were saying of actually getting students to work collaboratively around the globe via the platforms that we have, to problem solve, to think about things. You've got machines that can get a hole-in-one every time because they know exactly what it is, but that machine can't also hit a tennis ball, can't also draw a painting, can't do all the other stuff. So the generalist stuff and the creativity and the social stuff, and I actually think that a lot of where it's going to go, or where the success is going to be, comes down to how we are going to educate the next generations. I think that's kind of key for me.
I couldn't agree more with both of those, actually. The content of work, the activity of the work itself is going to change. It'll change with all of these things that they've described, but there will be some fundamental constants to it. We're social creatures, and we sometimes work well together when we are in the same space together, and sometimes we'd rather be alone and disparate. And again, one size doesn't fit all the time in the same way. So we will always want spaces to convene and work on things together. So the workplace itself isn't going to go away. It's going to change in nature. The stuff that is done in the space is going to change, and it's changing in real time. And we sound like we're talking about what is happening now, but actually we're talking about the future. It's just the future is arriving very quickly, and it's always changing now. We live in a world where the future is continuously now. So there are going to be those fundamental constants. It's because we are social people and social beings, and we want to be in the same space quite often when we're doing things together.
Yeah. From my side, first of all, I'd like to just say that when we are speaking about the future of work, we are speaking about the top level of the people that are working technology. Work will keep going like kept going in the last 100 years for quite a while, for normal people. On the people working in technology, I would summarize that with 2 words. One is data. You probably like that one. Because companies are, that's one of the ways. We are measuring everything. And we are measuring, we push out a feature in production. We measure what we want to, not because we want to understand. And one of the, only way we have to understand and to try things, you need to measure when you try one thing, what's the outcome. So you need to measure. So we try way Net Promoter Score. We see now Net Promoter Score is everywhere. Why? Well, because we don't have a way to measure satisfaction of the customer, how the employees feels in a company. If one of the way is going to suggest that company to somebody else. So data is one of the key things. On the other side, because data is empty. So is empty is good for the company. For the individual, data is empty, in the sense that you don't wake up in the morning and feel motivated to go to work because of data. You don't care about that. So the other one is meaning, and meaning is something that that's a kind of a mystery. But so meaning is something that is more of a personal life. Goals, values, and all those kind of things. But that is becoming more and more at the heart. If you want a company that is performing, you want employees that are involved in what they are doing. You want employees that they do stuff because they feel it's important. They don't just do one thing and then the goal of their life is in doing sports and going out with friends or writing books. Work must be part of the global meaning, so you want to give a meaning to that, and so that's I mean, I don't know how much we are experimenting to that. But I think it's a key part of that too. Yeah.
Cool. Do we have a question just here, and I'll finish off on Jonathan. That's cool.
Yeah, I had a question. We talked about high performance teams and well-being of your teams, etc. And we discussed remote working versus being in the office. But what I tend to see, and I mean this is just my experience, example of one, but what I tend to see is sometimes identical conditions, different teams, complete performance, completely different, and to me it seems that there's a huge personality component there, so it's like, kind of your character, your personality. So I was wondering, from an AI and data perspective, are we ready, or are we taking that into account? And if so, can we build models on top of that? And is that a good idea? So is that a good idea to say, you need that kind of personality person for this team to be high performing? And should we test everyone going into a company?
I mean, are you just suggesting a digital version of the Myers-Briggs test here?
Yes, exactly.
Basically, doing an MBTI using live activity, saying yesterday you were ENTJ, today you are not, you're fired.
Or maybe go to a different team, or like sit on.
I think this is very dangerous because this is a philosophical question for me. So I'm probably going to avoid later on this one, but. Are we intrinsically definable? If I'm an ENTJ, am I always an ENTJ? So I'm taking MBTI as an example. But if I'm a certain type of personality, am I always that type of personality? And by bucketing or labeling me as that, it reinforces that personality, which has very serious consequences. That said, the other end of it is if you don't acknowledge the fact that I'm unique, then am I just one of the many? Am I just a face in the crowd? We did a talk at Oxford a while ago with the psychology side of things, and we said we're all unique, but we are very predictable. So predictable uniqueness is the trait of every human, which means given enough memberships we belong to, so we might be tech people, live in London, we have a certain style of life. If you know enough about someone from a membership perspective, each of them not unique enough, the combination is effectively you. So you asked how unique is our personality. I don't think I'm unique, to be fair. It will take us a while to acknowledge that. I think as humans we are exclusively egocentric. We have this weird obsession that we are the only ones always, and we are very self-obsessed. If anything, machines have taught us that all the best things we can do, they can do better. But all the things we don't think we do very well are the true things we do well. Personality-wise, all I would say is we have to acknowledge that. We have to take into account that metrics and KPIs aside, sometimes we do things differently because we're bored. So I don't know how AI is supposed to adapt to that. I think a lot of companies have tried. To be honest, this is the definition of context for me. Can we bring context? I rely on consultants to do this, hopefully.
I think for me there are a number of aspects, and I think data on this will be really interesting to view over a slightly longer period of time and to hypothesize what that actually means and then test against those hypotheses. But a successful team shouldn't be a load of people that conform to a very similar personality. They're likely to have certain particularly shared values, because people fighting for the same cause with the same beliefs tend to go, enjoy the good things together and stick together through the bad times, and any team's likely to have that. So I think that shared values and shared vision is really important, and I think a mix of personalities. Any good team is going to have a range of complementary skills and personalities that complement each other, and that's going to be key to a productive team. But bedded together, the glue is going to be that shared vision and shared values, and those sort of ethics and the culture that really joins the people to know that you can trust the people around you, and that trust is kind of the key.
But should you get that through data? Should you be collecting that data? That's the question.
I think in time it will be really interesting, because there's a lot of stuff that to get to what that looks like, and those great teams will be testing lots of teams with different personalities and what personalities work well for different goals and different projects and purpose. I think it will be a little bit of insight, but actually, interestingly, I think that'll be one of those things that remains innately human, because stuff's changing and moods we don't understand and everything else. So I think there will be some interesting stuff that we can learn from that, but that's probably one of the bits that is going to be, a bit of a yardstick and a guide, but shouldn't be taken as gospel.
Any other thoughts?
Again, agree entirely with that, with both of these. And another way of saying it is that data can lead you to be a bit too deterministic about things. The idea that you can entirely measure everything about a person and then translate that into a full and complete understanding of how they will behave into the future and how they'll interact with other people into the future is scarily deterministic. The science behind all of this is, to my understanding, and it's amateur understanding, is far too young to be able to put any significant reliance on using that data to decide how you interact and behave with your team and the team you compose. It should be informative, maybe, but don't rely on that. Trust is what you should be building in your teams and amongst your team members, because that's how your team goes from being a group of people all working on something to a group of people being more than the sum of their parts.
Yeah, I personally would bet more on measuring what's the impact of the rules of the team on the outcome, more than what is single personality would bring to the team. I'm not sure, but I think there would be more impact on the way the team works together than what is a single individual will bring to the team.
Super. I'm going to wrap us up here, guys, but I'm hoping all the speakers can join us a bit after for some more beers. A couple of things then, as we end the night. There are more beers left somehow. I'm not sure how. A couple of things. First of all, huge thank you to all our speakers and our Capgemini speakers today. There's another team here that never gets enough recognition, and it's the team that pulled together tonight. You're seeing myself, but there's a whole huge team. There's roughly about 8 of us to 9 of us. They're all at the back. Could you give them a clap and a good applause? And then final ask, and we'll end the night. So Where Stoyan is on my right, your left, giving us a wave. Just behind him, there's a feedback piece. We spoke about data a lot today, and we didn't want to send you a huge, massive survey. So rather, we've done a visual data feedback piece. There's a couple of dots. There's a couple of questions. Grab a beer. There's some dots. Put some dots on the wall. We'll also be sending a more intuitive one tomorrow through Eventbrite for those of you that signed up through it. But we know no one wants to fill out a long piece just now. So I implore you to fill up the feedback piece. My final thank you is to you guys. You've all made it to tonight. You guys make this happen. Without you, without this community, we won't be able to do these events. So thank you. Come join us for a beer, and thank you for coming.